The Locked On Podcast Network presents the NBA Big 3 in 30. The 3 biggest stories in the NBA from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The NBA Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest stories in the NBA.
Jimmy Butler addressed the reports regarding a potential trade, but did we get any real clarity on the situation?
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, let's just jump right into it because we all know what we're going to be here talking about. Jimmy Butler, amid the trade speculation, reports that the Miami Heat are open to listening to offers for him, spoke to the media after Wednesday's practice. He was asked directly about those trade rumors, and he actually said that he liked it. Take a listen.
I actually like it. It's good to be talked about. I don't think there's a such thing as like bad publicity to a point. But somebody talk about me getting traded. That's a lot.
Where do you stand as far as long-term future, hopefully otherwise, with the Miami?
Who knows?
Who knows, says Jimmy Butler. Alex, we'll start with you. Does that sound like somebody who thinks that he'll be in Miami at the end of the season?
It sounds like somebody who, I know this isn't going to be like the take people want to hear, but it probably sounds like somebody who genuinely doesn't know. And I don't think these reports necessarily change that. Had, you put Jimmy in a lie detector test at the start of the season, and you would have asked him, hey, will you be here April 13th or April 9th, the Heat's final regular season game on Sunday at 1 p.m.? I think his answer would have been, I don't know, So I really don't think these reports change anything. And by the way, I heard both of your conversations yesterday on Locked On about this. So I think we're kind of on the same page. And I apologize if I'm not bringing like a totally different perspective. But Jimmy Butler, we've seen him go absolutely crazy in the media and with a front office. Like if he won it out, we would know he won it out. Yesterday, that report gets leaked. He doesn't walk away after practice without getting in front of a camera and saying, Pat Riley, trade my ass. Mm-hmm. So I think because yesterday didn't speak to the media, which is typical with Jimmy Butler, he doesn't usually do post media veils after he practices. Like it's not a common thing. I shouldn't say it's unusual. People see that and they say, Jimmy's avoiding the media. This must mean something's brewing. And I just don't feel that way. So I think it sounds like somebody who genuinely doesn't know. Like, what are the Heat going to do? How are they feeling? We know how Pat Riley felt before the season. Are we really buying into a 3-game sample size here of them looking incredible or a smaller sample size of this starting lineup looking incredible? I don't think anybody truthfully knows.
David, what do you think?
I think it's pretty similarly. I think the ball kind of seems squarely in Pat Riley in the front office's court. Like they have control over the situation. I think this is different than what we saw from him in Philadelphia, different from we saw him in Chicago or Minnesota. This is not a player trying to force his way out. If he had his druthers, I think his preference would be to get paid a hell of a lot of money, stay in Miami, keep his family here, and enjoy the life that he's been living over the past 6 seasons. And I don't know that that's realistic. And so I think that's where the crux of the conflict is that he's not going to get all of those things. He doesn't get to decide that. And so it's up to Riley to kind of make that choice and determine, look, we tried to negotiate something with your agent, Bernie Lee. You want the max? We're not giving you the max. And this is just me reading between the lines, but I think based on what, we've seen from Bernie Lee and the comments and the reports from Shams just yesterday, and we see Jimmy's reaction. And look, he's playful. He likes teasing the media. Mm-hmm. We know that. For people who are watching this on YouTube, obviously you can see that kind of smirk, tongue-in-cheek expression that he's got there. But I think he kind of he knows that something is happening, something is brewing, and yet he's not in control of it. He is not, as Alex said, dictating things. He's not demanding a trade. He's just not going to be able to call the shots the way he did in other locations. And so that's where the awkwardness comes in, because who knows? Who knows what could happen? If somebody gets a deal that makes sense to Miami and the front office, they'll take it. And that's just the reality.
Yeah, I mean, like we said on yesterday's show, David, it's like he used to be a guy where you just hung up the phone. He's not the guy where you just hang up the phone anymore. Sometimes there's guys who are superstars, but you got to listen. And Jimmy Butler in Miami has been treated like a superstar. He's mostly been paid like a superstar. I don't think he wants to leave Miami either. I mean, heck, I don't really know how opening up a brick and mortar business works and how long the ramp up is to that, but I don't imagine that you open up a big faced coffee, in the design district and if you were trying to get out of here. But for the first time in Jimmy's career, I mean, not the first time necessarily, because this is what happened when he left Chicago, but he's not in control. And like David, you just said, like, okay, you could stay in Miami. You're going to get paid a whole lot less money. I know you keep saying that you don't care about money, but we all know that that's BS. Like, who doesn't care? Like, I'm not even like accusing him of anything, but it's like, whatever. Right. Like, so, okay, you're not going to get the max contract, but you can stay in Miami, or maybe you can go somewhere else and get that max contract. So those are kind of the things that he's going to have to decide, or I guess maybe not, since I guess it does not feel like it's in his control anymore. It's kind of up to the Heat to do what's best for the Heat. And as tough as it might be to see Jimmy Butler walk away, Pat Riley can't think like that. He can't think emotionally. He has to think about what's best for the organization. Alex, it looked like you wanted to say something there. You want to jump in? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I just want to point out that, people scroll through social media. That's how everybody gets their info nowadays. And I'm guilty of it as well. And you see the tweet, Jimmy Butler, when asked if he wants to be in Miami, quote, "Who knows?" Right? Like, no context. And we see the video, and we know how Jimmy is with the media. We have that luxury, obviously, but I think most people know he's always very coy and
right. That's why I included the video here. I wanted people to see it. Yeah.
Right. And today, so I'm doing the Hawk and Crowder show, and at 2 p.m., first thing they come on the air, they're like, "Oh, did you read Jimmy's quotes?" I say, hey, I have the audio here. Listen to the audio with me and tell me if this sounds like somebody who genuinely, as it reads or as it sounds, like, how do you feel about it? And I think there's an important delineation there between how are you reading the headline and how it is Jimmy Butler actually saying this, given the context of how Jimmy Butler approaches his conversations with the media, and to the fact that Jimmy doesn't control this outcome anymore. That's how the NBA wants it, right? They tried to take some of the power back from the players. The fact that Jimmy Butler can't force his hand and say, "Hey, Heat, you're going to lose me this offseason if you don't either trade me or pay me, because I'll go sign with anybody else." Well, it doesn't work that way anymore because of the cap construct of the NBA right now. So there's only a certain amount of teams that can. So again, going back to, and you guys touched on this yesterday, it doesn't surprise me that this is being talked about now. I don't know for sure that it's coming from Bernie Lee. I don't know if this is Jimmy Butler. Like, I don't know for sure, but I have a feeling, a very good feeling, that it's not from the Heat. And that right now, Jimmy Butler just doesn't have any sort of control over what happens. And he understands that if the Heat aren't going to give him the extension, which right now feels like they're not, then he's going to have to opt in and not get to go title chase somewhere.
Would you give him the extension? Sorry, I just want to get your take. What would you give him the extension? Because we've debated it here, but maybe an outsider perspective. Yeah, how would you feel about what he gets paid, and how much do you think he is, quote unquote, deserving at this point?
I mean, ask me in April. Like, I know that's an easy out, and I'm sorry, but it is. It is. I know. But what if Jimmy Butler, and it's not likely. I realize this. I know it's not likely. This is me, Heat glasses on, culture glasses on, right? Like, but what if Jimmy Butler turns into playoff Jimmy again in April, May? Honestly, and Tyler Hero is playing at this level, and the Heat stay healthy. I mean, I'm not saying that they're going to win an NBA title, but it would still feel how it felt coming off of 2023 and how we all talked ourselves into before Kelly Oubre takes out Jimmy's knee, which is, hey, it might click again in the playoffs. Like, who knows, So I realize there's clearly a gap in talent between the Celtics and the Bucks and the teams that got better, the Knicks, right? Like, Cavs. There's clearly the Cavs, right? Like, there's an obvious gap between what those teams did and what the Heat did. But the Miami Heat are a stubborn franchise, and it usually works for them following this type of, I don't know if you want to call it a routine or just structure or process. And they like their guys, but at a certain point, like you're asking me, are they going to give them the extension or not? I think this specific year, the Heat are approaching it as, hey, this either works this year or it doesn't.
Yeah.
And
it
and
feels
I think
like a last
everybody
dance.
involved understands that.
Yeah,
Right.
it feels like a last dance, and I think that's why you have Jimmy saying, who knows, when asked if he is going to remain a member of the Miami Heat, because he genuinely doesn't. And look, to David's point, or to your point, and I think it was a great one, like this is what the NBA wants, is for these super teams not to exist and for the players not to have all this empowerment and stuff. The unintended consequence of all of this was with the new CBA and this apron world that we live in, is that beloved superstars in their home markets have to get traded because of pure finances, and it's not for basketball reasons anymore. And that's the part that is really kind of hanging over the Heat. Like if this first apron, second apron stuff wasn't a thing, it used to just be up to the owner to just be like, I'm just going to pay all these guys, and we'll go over the cap, and it'll be really expensive, and there's some luxury taxes, and that hurts, but it wasn't hurting enough. And it wasn't hurting like just the purse strings, but also before, it used to not hurt your roster building. Now there's like limitations that if you hit a certain, salary payroll, like you literally can't do things with your roster. You start losing draft picks even if you have too high of a payroll. And so it becomes untenable. And I think this was like a real unfortunate consequence that the league put in. So hey, you wanted everybody to be even and all that. So I don't know. Congrats, I guess, NBA.
Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
The Kings exercise a demon. They beat the Pelicans.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast.
It feels good just to be able to say that the Kings beat the Pelicans. If you didn't go through those 6 games of hell last season where the Pelicans didn't just beat the Kings over and over and over and over and over and over again, they kicked the Kings' butt over and over and over and over and over and over again, including eliminating their chances from getting back into the playoffs. So exhale. The Kings beat the Pelicans. It's possible. It's possible. Now, I know that defeating a 5-21 team maybe shouldn't have been as difficult or as scary as tonight's win was. 111-109, the final score. The Kings were up like 10 points in the fourth quarter, and the Pelicans came back to have a chance to steal it, which, oh my God, if the Kings had found a way to lose that game, when I tell you Locked On Kings would have been like a funeral or a absolute rage fest. I don't know what this podcast would have been tonight. Thank God we don't have to worry about it. We don't have to deal with it. The Kings overcame CJ McCollum's hate. He just can't seem to let 2013 go. And if you're not familiar, CJ shared not a handful of years ago, he shared that the Sacramento Kings actually promised to draft CJ McCollum. They promised him that they were going to draft him. Of course, they didn't draft him in 2013, and he seems to just love to cook the Kings ever since. Add him to the list of guys that the Kings should have taken or were going to take and passed up on. I mean, of course, Dame Lillard, his longtime partner and teammate in Portland, was also one of those guys. CJ tonight had 36 points, 17 of them in the fourth quarter. He was just straight up willing the Pelicans to keep their domination over the Kings going, just out of spite. That's the only thing I'm going to say it. That's the only reason why I'm gonna say it's because of 2013, and that's the reason why CJ wanted to beat the Kings so bad. No idea if that's the case, but that's what I'm saying. I'm sticking to it here on Locked On Kings. But ultimately, the Kings get the win. They beat the Pelicans. In reality, while things could have certainly been cleaner, certainly could have been tighter, this game could have been a lot better, because certainly during this now 5-game stretch where the Kings are 4-1 and playing a lot better basketball, this was definitely not the best game that they've played. out of that stretch, especially offensively coming off the game that they just had, or really 2 games in a row where they scored 140 and 141 points, right? So offensively and at times defensively, certainly not the best night for the Sacramento Kings. But look, you got the win. You broke the Pelicans curse. And this win accomplishes a handful of things. Number one, it gets you back to 500. And that's a big deal when you look at the upcoming schedule. And that's something that we'll get to at the end of this podcast. And it's the manner of which the Sacramento Kings won this game that I think is pretty encouraging, despite it being so close and despite it not being the prettiest of games. But how the Kings won, I think, is something that Mike Brown can take a lot of positives from. You have Domantas Sabonis, who steps up in a major way and carries you through the first half where offensively you were really struggling. You have DeMar DeRozan dominate in the third quarter. And then you have the Kings defense closing things out in the fourth. And we're going to break all 3 of these things down and go into them in more detail. But different guys stepped up. You had different portions of the game where different things helped carry you through. It wasn't one thing being the difference maker the entire night. And it's a good team win, right? It's the definition of a really good team win for the Kings. And we have to talk about the domination from Domantas Sabonis tonight. 32 points, 11 of 15 from the field. He's a perfect 9 of 9 from the free throw line, which you love to see. 20 rebounds, 6 of them offensive, 3 assists, 2 steals, and my favorite number, even more than 32 points, 1 turnover. The Kings in general are doing a much better job taking care of the basketball. I have some numbers to reflect that over this stretch in coming up in the show. But Domantas Sabonis was one of the real big culprits to their turnover issues. And lately, he's done a much better job taking care of the basketball. And when he can be in attack mode and be as aggressive offensively as he was tonight, especially in that first half, and he's taking care of the basketball and not turning it over when teams are attacking him, trying to take the ball out of his hands and trying to meet him with physicality at the rim and in the paint. When Domas can take care of the basketball and score at the level that he did in this game, it's really encouraging. This is the game that critics have been calling for. This is the game that critics kind of insult him for. Domas is not a $40+ million per year player because offensively he can't have those nights where he leads you, he carries you to a victory. He did tonight, right? The Sacramento Kings were dreadful in the first half. They shot 36% from the field, 23% from 3-point range in the first half. Nobody was really able to get anything going except for Domantas Sabonis, who had a 20-point, 12-rebound, double-double at halftime. The next closest scorer for the Kings was Fox with 10. Everybody else was in single digits, right? So you're ice cold again from the field against a long, lengthy, aggressive physical team that has given you a lot of issues in the past. And Domas keeps you in it, keeps it close. Kings trailed by 2 at the half, and bought Sacramento time for what happened in the third quarter when DeMar DeRozan really woke up. And we'll get to that in just a second. What I love about this game is, like I said, Domas kind of answered the call of those critics. Of course, those critics are going to go radio silent, right? You're not going to hear any of them talk about it because this is not the first time this season that Domas has done this. In fact, he's been in attack mode a lot more this season that I can remember. Right. And it's attack mode, but the right way. And it makes you think back to the challenges from Domas's teammates and coaching staff during training camp and preseason of, hey, look to shoot and look to score more. Now, the primary focus of that was on the 3-point side. And Domas did hit a 3 tonight, went 1 of 1 from 3-point range. Mike Brown has encouraged him, hey, take 3, 4, 5 of those shots a night if they're available to you. And he's been hitting those shots at a pretty reasonable clip. But it wasn't just that the Kings were challenging Domas to shoot more of those threes. The Kings wanted Domas to, while his first instinct is to play make and try and find his teammates, and that's great, and you never want to take that away from Domas, they've encouraged him to look to score himself more. And in addition to the 3-point shooting, I think we're seeing Domas doing a better job of recognizing when he can attack the rim and when he can look to score in the paint. And when he attacks, good things are happening, not just for the Kings, but for him. This is the 8th game this season where Domas has 15 or more field goal attempts, right? 15 is not an absurd number, but it's not something that Domas does as often as he should, because in those 8 games with 15 or more field goal attempts, Domas is averaging 26 points per game and shooting 60% 2% from the field. What's a little perplexing is that the Kings are only 4-4 in those games. So a 500 record, just like what they're at right now. To me, I don't think that speaks negatively on Sabonis. I think that speaks negatively on the rest of the Sacramento Kings. If Domas is attacking and scoring at the rate that he was tonight, you absolutely should be winning that basketball game. And I think what also that number reveals is when Domas is doing this and stepping up and doing it, it's when his team needs him to, because other guys may not be able, or not enough guys, not enough of the stars are pulling their weight to help him out. Like in reality, with how lethal this team is offensively, if Domas is giving you 26 points in a game or more, you should 100% be winning that game. That hasn't been the case as much as it should be in this game, but I think Domas is recognizing when to attack and who to attack, right? The Pelicans no longer have Jonas Valanciunas. He's gone, and they never really replaced him. That's one of the reasons why they're playing so terribly to start the season. I understand they've been riddled by injuries too. But no Valanciunas, who gave Sabonis problems in the 6 times they lost to the Kings lost to him last year. So no Valanciunas. The Pelicans never really replaced him. So Domas feasts, right, on the boards and scoring in the paint. But he loves to attack star bigs as well, right? Over those 8 games that I laid out for you where he has 15 or more field goal attempts, 4 of those games are against star centers. 2 against Rudy Gobert, 2 against Victor Wembanyama, and the Kings play Anthony Davis and the Los Angeles Lakers twice next week. So I have to imagine at least one of them, if not both of them, are also going to be 15 attempt games for Domas. He loves to attack star bigs, and that's pretty encouraging. Again, for a guy that the critics say isn't worth the money because offensively he doesn't attack and doesn't score and can't lead the Kings. Well, here you go. He did it for you. I don't expect you to tweet about it or write about it or say anything about it because it goes against your narrative and you probably weren't watching anyway. But at least we know, the people who actually watch him play, we know he's capable of doing it. And here's a game where the Kings needed him to do it and he helped carry them through.
Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only the incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more near you. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
Peyton Pritchard, Derek White shoot the Celtics past the Detroit Pistons. I want to start with the big story, the big picture. And it's funny. After the game, I'm texting with Tom Westerholm, and I got to give him full credit for this. He said watching the Celtics is like Law and Order. Like, yeah, what do you mean? The cops got their guy? The prosecutors nailed the prosecution. They got their guy, and he's going away? Amazing. These are the best cops ever. This is the best lawyers ever, best DA ever. Like, yeah, they always end up winning. It's always the same story. It's basically find your way, get where you need to go, close the door. Very rarely is there any sort of deviation from this track. I understand. I railed against why people say the Celtics are boring, but I understand that there's no new storyline to latch onto. There's nothing spicy. There's nothing. I was listening on my way home to Locked On Pistons, and oh my God, Kuka Hill is going nuts. But I mean, obviously the Pistons are 10-16. They are struggling mightily, and this was not a good game for them at all. It started out ugly. I tweeted out the Commodore's brick house. I said, this is the TD Garden here. It's a brick house. Everybody's missing everything. Both teams started out shooting like 18%. The only difference here is the Celtics turned it around and started hitting shots and ended up shooting 51% from the field. But in the first quarter, they were 42%, 11 of 26, and that's after they got hot. The Pistons were 29.5% in the first quarter. In the second quarter, Pistons and Celtics started to hit shots. In the second half, the Celtics really took off, hitting 58.5% of their shots, 11 of 22 from 3 in the second half. Pistons, the box score story of this game, the Celtics hit 20 of 48 from 3. the Pistons hit 7 of 37 from 3. My favorite number from this game, the Pistons hit 7 of 37 from 3. Peyton Pritchard was 7 of 15 from 3. Derek White was 7 of 12 from 3. So when you get two guys from the other team matching your three-point output, you are in trouble, buddy. And Pistons just remember the last week when the Celtics played the Pistons, they were hitting shots. They were hitting threes, and that's why they kept it close. But in this one, it just was a steady march. The Celtics and Pistons went back and forth. A few lead changes in the first quarter. Second quarter, halfway through the second quarter, 4-point game. And the Celtics go on this, I'm going to say 22-9 run, because I won't count the Cade Cunningham layup. 22-9 run sounds better than 22-11. They closed the second quarter 22-11. I'm going to say 22-9 run, just because I like that better. That broke the game open, and that was it. My first player that I want to acknowledge is Luke Cornett, because at the end of the first quarter, the Celtics came out. The whole thing was a little chaotic. It was a little frenzied. It was a little nuts. We almost got some really cool highlights out of it. Jaylen Brown and Kristaps Porzingis almost connecting on a double alley-oop. It still ended in a Porzingis dunk, but Porzingis getting the ball, a lob to Jaylen, a lob back to Porzingis. The dunk ended up getting blocked, but then the ball got back to him and he finished it. But that would have been a super cool highlight. But Luke Cornett came in and things settled down. He scored 8 points at the end of the first quarter. It just was a little bit of I don't know why he was the one that calmed things down, but he was. And after that, Celtics just started that's where the march happened. The boots just boom, 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 boom. On Boston Sports Journal, I compared it to the high tide just overtaking a sandcastle. It was there. The tide rolls in, and slowly it starts to wear away at it. And then the next big wave comes in and knocks part of it down. And before you know it, the whole thing is covered and you would not even know it existed. The Pistons had their chances in the first quarter. The Celtics just kept going. That first little trickle of water, you started to see the little cracks in Detroit. You started to see that they had nothing in this game. Then in the second quarter, the water started to get closer and closer. The big wave hit halfway through the second quarter where the Celtics went on that run. And the third and the fourth quarter was just flooding and overtaking the Pistons. Pistons had no shot in the second half. So how does that happen? I mean, shout out to Luke Cornett for being kind of like that pivot point. But honestly, what happened with this Celtics team? I'm going to fold Jaylen Brown into this conversation about being unselfish. But basically, Joe Mazzulla said after the game that there are egos. The Celtics have egos. And he said, it's important to know that we have egos because we're keeping them in the right place. And he wants people to understand that the Celtics, like any other NBA team, are full of super confident guys that believe incredibly highly of themselves. And so their egos are big. Of course they are. Every NBA player's ego is huge. But the Celtics, and the difference between them and a lot of other teams, is they put that aside. That's why Joe Mazzulla made sure he said, we have egos. You got to know that we have egos. It's because he wants everybody to know that for the betterment of the team, for the betterment of what the Celtics need to accomplish, Jaylen Brown, Peyton Pritchard, Jason Tatum, when he plays, he didn't play in this game. These guys are all putting their egos aside to continue making the right plays. These guys are putting their own personal best interests aside to make sure that the Celtics are playing a style that makes the most sense for what they need to accomplish.